Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Mikey, today's field note is entitled, Why Do People Insist on Holding Far Too Many Team Meetings? Some people even do 15-minute leadership meetings 7 days a week at the same time, like right
Which
now.
I don't know that we would consider this a meeting. It's clearly you and I.
It's a conversation.
Together.
We're talking about serious things.
Yeah.
So does this count? Are we indicted? Are we even able to talk about this field note?
I didn't think you would call this into question. No, I think this is fine. Technically, it is a meeting. And technically, this meeting is an email, and we're still meeting about it, right? It starts off as an email.
Right.
And we still
like when people say, should this meeting have been an email? Yes, that often is the thing. So now, okay, here we are for field note 1720. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Lead Better. You responded to the invitation to come to our meeting, so here we are. The question is going to be about outputs and outcomes. Like, are they different things? And then I think the grade we can give ourselves at the end of this meeting is: did we have a better outcome? It wasn't just an output of saying, "Well, we did another 15-minute Lead Better."
Yeah. I agree. I'm getting it up on Twitter so that even more people can join us here. So this distinction between outputs and outcomes, we've framed this in different ways before. Like how the most common way that we've talked about it is that leaders, some in meeting-oriented organizations, have a tendency to let the meeting do the work of the organization. And when the meeting becomes the work. So this is the first time that we're talking about it outside of that kind of framework. And we're kind of splitting up exactly what we mean by that and saying, let's talk about the difference between outputs and outcomes, right? And so outputs, tangible activities and deliverables a team produces. So meetings held, calls made, features launched, presentations delivered. Those are outputs.
So those are outputs, and that's different than outcomes. And I think we're talking about the different levels of consequence, in essence.
Right. Outcomes, on the other hand, are meaningful results that those activities are meant to create, such as higher revenue, improved customer satisfaction, stronger team engagement, and faster decision-making. So outputs reflect the effort, and the outcomes reflect like the impact that you had in actually accomplishing those things.
Right. And so if you were evaluating and saying, well, we had 20 meetings about this, well, what was the goal of those meetings? Well, we needed to increase our market share, X, where, this field, this number, whatever it is. Did we? Like, you can start to look at it and say, no, we just spent a lot of time talking about it.
Right.
So now, sometimes you're having too many meetings. Maybe sometimes you're having too few meetings. I mean, that can be the case too. Now, I can give you an example from today without getting too detailed. So I was on a meeting with two other folks on our team and two other outside organizations. And this was both a marketing meeting and a creative meeting about different things that we're doing to help kind of support some of the things that we're doing in admired leadership in terms of, field notes and our Alex, which is our incredibly shockingly good AI coach, and then our main behavior platform, and then obviously the rest of the firm and what they do in coaching and advising. But in the middle of all of that, you're kind of saying, like, I could have taken today, like just this last hour, I was on for a full hour in a live conversation with the founding managing partner of our firm. And if he had said to me, how are we doing on creating those new assets that we need for this new endeavor? I could have said, we had a good meeting about that this morning.
Yes.
And we did, right?
Yes.
And I could probably lean in and say, we talked about this. We actually looked at some of these new ideas and some of the new ways of this, and it could all be BS.
Yes.
Because the real question is, are we creating the right stuff for the right reason to reach the right people, to change the right lives, right? So you can use a lot of hiding behind that we had a really cool meeting. It was a meeting. It was even recorded, right? There'll be AI notes from that meeting. So it's like, we know that a thing happened, but did it help? Don't know yet. Like
Yeah.
in fact, the outcomes still rest on the shoulders of everybody who is in that meeting.
So if your leader pushes back on you and says, "Tell me what the outputs and the outcomes are," the first time
Hmm.
any leader says that would be confusing. Like it would need to be
Hmm.
common language that you would have inside the building,
Yeah.
not just so that you know that
Yes.
the
Right.
question is coming, but so that you recognize the leader is more interested in you not using meetings as a smokescreen to
Hmm.
hide the fact that you're not actually getting any of the outcomes done, right?
Yes. Now, yeah. Now, my question for you, Mikey, then is because you were the great definer of outputs and outcomes. Can we look at some of the outputs as the stepping stones to the outcomes?
Absolutely. And sometimes you just
So they're
need
not
that on the
necessarily
calendar.
negative.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. But the issue that we typically see is that outputs become an outsized version of the
Hmm.
outcomes themselves, right? And
Hmm.
that's a lot of outs. You got 3 outs there. But when we mistake our outcomes for outputs is really when we get in trouble. So the work of the meeting itself, actually putting the
Hmm.
meeting together, there's a couple flags in many of these organizations that kind of the work of the meeting becomes the
Hmm.
work of the organization. And
Right.
that's when they have pre-meetings and they've got pre-planning for the
Right.
actual meetings
Yes.
itself.
Right.
Like and all of it is about that 1 hour on Tuesday afternoons where they get together and they want to have this successful show of what's
Hmm.
going on, and then
Right.
they'll wrap up, and then everything's all week long seems to rotate around getting ready for that meeting and coming off. And so more often than not, you can see something like, well, an earnings call for a publicly traded company would obviously make the mistake of like becoming one of those things. Like we've got our earnings call coming up uh, this quarter, and so preparation begins for that earning calls as soon as the previous earning call is over. And so
Hmm.
you'll have the tendency to be like, I've got an entire team that's dedicated to making sure that the earning call goes well, that we're using the exact kind of language. And we meet 7 or 8 times in, leading up towards the earning call. And then after the learning call is over, we immediately meet together to do a debrief of how it went and whether or not it's being absorbed by the community in the way. Did our stock price go up as a result, or did it go back down?
Hmm.
And everything is just paying attention to now what is the actual work of the organization doesn't even come up in all of that, right? It's
Right.
just
Yeah.
about
The meetings are just the theater of productivity. It's like,
yes,
yeah,
right.
we're productive. We did this thing. Yeah.
Right. So in organizations where outputs are rewarded instead of outcomes,
Hmm.
meetings have a tendency to take on this outside role. They
Outside
mushroom.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
so I
that's
guess
the
how do you then guard against this idea that motion is the progress, right? That in understanding that just because we're active doesn't mean we're achieving the things we need to achieve. So how do you get everybody on the balance? Because sometimes that you need to have meetings, you need to have conversation, but at some point you've got to kind of cut to the chase to say, if all of this happens and 12 months go by and we still haven't really solved the problems we were dealing with a year ago, well, what was it all for? Right.
right. So my dad has served on a few boards, and so I've seen reflection from like
Hmm.
that type of thing. And it worked quarterly in the same way that earnings call in a publicly traded company would. And you could tell the organization that he was sitting on the boards for it was the exact same thing. I even worked for one of these companies for a time where the preparation of those reports, the board report became
Hmm.
the only thing. And so unless one of the board members was brave enough to be like, aren't we hearing the exact same thing we have for the last 16 quarters, right? Isn't this the same thing that we did 4 years ago, right? It's the same kind of report. So there needs to be something that is built in that I would think would be intentionally challenging the outcomes and the outputs at the same way. Like, should
Yeah.
we be having? So I know that it's become a meme, but the idea of this could have been an email might be something that we challenge ourselves with every single meeting that we have. Like I kind
Yeah.
of like the idea that that is something that is in our brain constantly now because of the way that the meme works, that we're constantly asking ourselves, should we? And most of the time we're trying to say we should have eliminated this meeting completely. But the real question, we need to create a new meme, Scott, is a question that gets at this core idea is like, where is the outcome as a result of this meeting? What's the real point of this? And so sometimes the best way to do that is to kind of force yourself to state it up front. We've mentioned this in other field notes, that the best leaders will state up front the purpose of the meeting, what they're doing, what they hope to accomplish, and are they stating more outcomes or outputs there? They should be stating multiple outputs in that one sentence that they're saying the purpose of this meeting is, right? And so,
and by the way, that meeting, that purpose could be just, we're going to think out loud. And in fact, a lot of the time, I mean, I think in a lot of organizations, the biggest problem is people are like, are we doing the right thing? Right? They're just not sure that like we're tackling the right thing. And one of the more brilliant people that I know does talk about it and demonstrates it, personally around the idea that how we have conversations is actually the process of our intellectual growth. It's the way that we think. So if you just say, I don't want to have any meetings, I can think on my own, right? You can have a meeting with yourself. You're probably going to have less effective thinking. Now, let me come back to that because two things popped in my mind that I think we can pull off here in the next couple of minutes. So one, you already alluded to it, but in the field note, it talks about this idea of that if your organization is rewarding these outputs, you're going to get more meetings. They're going to just mushroom. There are all kinds of meetings. So you have to and why would that happen? Because outputs are easier to observe and control than the outcomes. That's a little harder. So it's like, okay, these are things we can just check off. Okay, we did that. So the one question is, can you, and it says the good leader reverses this pattern by defining the clear measurable outcomes that you outlined. But what do you do if you're in a company where you're not in charge and there are a lot of meetings? How do you then lead up in those meetings? And one of the things that I'll refer to, apparently you've heard we do a daily newsletter for leaders called Field Notes. There are other newsletters for leaders, I've heard. One of them is from Alan Murray's operation over at the Wall Street Journal. And today's written by Lila McClellan. And it's an example from the CEO of Superhuman, Grammarly was part of that. It's Shashir Maroda, who was actually before that at Walmart, Spotify, and YouTube, a lot of different examples, and gave the example that during a particular era of YouTube, one of the television show Modern Family was in its golden era. So this was a little while ago. And they were trying to distribute links and they were trying to say which should be free or not free. And so one group of people inside YouTube was saying, well, we need to do right by the users, just send them what they want. Another group said, if you start doing that, nobody will ever put any of their good stuff on YouTube. So this went back and forth. And then it said that as they got in this exhausting conversation, he realized that they were asking the wrong question. He says, we're not going to talk about Modern Family. We're going to talk about a different topic. Is the online video market in 10 years going to be more about consistency or more about comprehensiveness? And he called that query, I think it's EIGEN, an eigen question. I wasn't in algebra where you had eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So somebody tell me. And so in stating this, you're saying, what is the most discerning question in a set of questions? And so I was thinking that's today's, email in the CEO brief from the Wall Street Journal. And I was like, well, guess what? If you're in a lot of meetings, you can always be thinking, you can sit there and be complaining, we're having another meeting. But don't you want to be occasionally the person who says, what's the question going to be in 10 years here? Can you ask the question that makes everybody go, oh, that's it? Right. So if you're building a culture where people are kind of realizing that in a meeting, you can advance it. You're not stuck in just checking the box. Then you might have some meetings that people actually like to attend because a little bit of magic might occur.
Right. If you're leading
hopefully
up,
that wasn't too much of a detour. Did that make sense?
No, I don't think so. It makes sense to me. If you're leading up and you're trying to figure out what's the right question to kind of redirect the seniors in the room to be able to do that, I think that's the right question. You can't then therefore use the exact same question the next time, right? You can't just be known as the person who constantly asks the 10-year question, right? That your nickname in the organization is going to be T-Bone for a very specific reason, right? And so but strength, lengthening or shortening time horizons is a good way to kind of get to that. We didn't do it about time horizons. We did it about adding a zero, a couple field notes back, right? So if we're lengthening or shortening other things, so we're trying to say like determining what capacity is, determining like what the outcome is in 10 years or 100 years. Like those are good ways to kind of reframe the question, is to really get at the idea of, are we asking the right thing?
Yeah.
But
there's a
whether or
lot
not
more we
actually,
could say.
yeah,
But we have
but I don't,
26 seconds left in the 15th minute if we want to try to say that we finished our 15-minute meeting technically, sort of, in 15 minutes.
Right. No, I think the main thing we need to say is good leaders intentionally reverse the pattern, right? The
There you
pattern
go.
is for the mushroom to kind of build as a result of it. If you're mindful of it and you intentionally work against that, you're going to be better than 90% of leaders.
15:59.
All right. Nice. Okay. Good to see you today. Thank you. Bye now.